We invite you to stay tuned for the live broadcast of the Wednesday evening Bible study of the Mayfield Drive Baptist Church, located at 271 Mayfield Drive, Smyrna, Tennessee. We will now join the service.
Well, we are back again, and this is our last part on the Passover series. So next week we will be resuming our study on the one that we suspended to put this one into, and that will be what we as Missionary Baptists believe. So this is the 13th and final part. So we find ourselves back again on Golgotha. This is where Jesus was crucified. And it's Wednesday afternoon. This is the introduction to part 13. Jesus has died, but he's still hanging on the cross. A high Sabbath is rapidly approaching. The bodies of those hanging on the three crosses must be taken down and something done with them. A secret disciple of Jesus goes to Pilate to ask for the body of Jesus. He has a new tomb built for himself that's nearby to Calvary. He wants to bury Jesus in this new tomb. Pilate is surprised that Jesus is already dead. He grants Joseph of Arimathea the right to take the body of Jesus down from the cross, prepare it, and then place it in his own tomb. John writes that Nicodemus assisted him by bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100-pound weight. John writes in John chapter 19 and verse 40, They took the body. I'm sorry, I missed some words crossed up there. Then took they. There you go. N is left off of the back in the front of it, so that confuses things. Then took they the body of Jesus and wound it in linen clothes with the spices, as the manner of the Jews is to bury. Now, what is the Jews' manner of burying? And that's what we're going to, a large part of our lesson this evening is going to address this and find out just exactly what all of this is. So I want to now go outside of the Scriptures in order for us to gain an insight of the burial methods and traditions during this time period. These are details the Scriptures do not reveal to us. But we do need to understand these things in order to fully understand the Scriptures and the setting and the background of this. And I have where I've taken this from on down later on. So from here to quite a bit, we're going to be quoting from this. By the time Jesus was teaching in and around ancient Jerusalem in the 1st century A.D., the Hebrews, or Jews, the ethnic group descendant of the patriarch Abraham, had already been influenced by Greek and Roman culture. But the Hebrews didn't adopt the burial traditions of these cultures, which typically involved cremation rather than burial. The life, teachings, and death of Jesus helped bring these Hebrew traditions to light. Time of burial. The Hebrews buried their dead immediately, no later than a day after the person passed away. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, this custom stems from the Mosaic Law, which ordered that any person hung on a tree or cross as a form of execution should be taken down and buried within a day after death. While this law applies directly to the bodies of executed criminals, the Hebrews generally applied it to everyone. Jesus Christ, after he died from execution on a tree or cross, was buried within a day. Technically within hours. Burial preparation. Or
if you look at the Bible account, they executed Jesus as a criminal. The Jews did. The Romans didn't.
Right.
But the Jews did. So Jewish law would have been to treat him as a criminal.
Correct. And the Romans were only doing it because of the insistence of the Jews.
To keep the peace.
To keep the peace, yes. Now, I can understand the reasoning behind burying as quickly as they did, because you did not want disease or anything to spread. If a person died from a disease or something, you didn't want that to be spread. All right, time of burial, we read that. Burial preparation. The Hebrews didn't practice embalming in the way other cultures did, such as the Egyptians. They did, though, traditionally put spices and aromatic ointments on the dead bodies in order to help remove unpleasant odors. In fact, after Jesus died, a man named Joseph of Arimathea, according to the Bible writer John's Gospel account, requested permission to prepare Jesus' body just the way the Jews had a custom of preparing for burial, using myrrh, aloes, spices, and linen bandaging. The place of burial. The Hebrews seemingly kept their burial places simple and less ostentatious than those from surrounding cultures who decorated grave sites with paintings and other ornamentations. A person was buried either in the ground or in a memorial tomb. Having a place of burial among the Hebrews was significant and generally represented that a person was not a criminal outcast and had the hope of being resurrected by God. Some persons who weren't considered worthy of a burial place were pitched into the valley of Hinnom, outside the Jerusalem city walls, to be burned along with the city's refuge. Now, just a comment on this. Jesus used this valley to describe hell. Gehenna. Because it was always burning. The fires never went out. So they were constantly burning all the time, 24/7, 365, as we would say. Yeah. Absolutely. So bodies of those, all right, for instance, the two thieves who died alongside of Jesus, their bodies were probably taken down by the Romans and then taken out to the valley of Hinnom and tossed on the fires, whereas Jesus' body was claimed. Their bodies probably were not claimed because, as we'll see here, normally it wasn't a tradition to give the body to the family when the person was crucified. Yes, sir. Again, they were criminals. Yes.
And they were considered Jesus a criminal too.
Yes. And that's where Jesus' body would have wound up if Nicodemus, or Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus had not intervened. That's the reality of it.
And also, that's where he said, where the worm dieth not, that talked about a little worm that,
Mm-hmm.
I think also this Valley of Hinnon, I think that was one place where they had that burning. It was almost kept that side of the wall safe from, but that was the trash pile. That was,
Right.
That was the dump.
All the rubbish, all the trash, unwanted bodies, regardless. Animals, yeah, all of that. Where do you think the insides of the, animals that were not finished burning for sacrifices? I mean, the residue of those things, where would they go? Valley of Hinnom. So we get the idea of how unclean it was and bad as it was. All right. Post-burial tradition. Hebrews viewed grave sites as unclean. Because of this, the Jews would whitewash grave markers and tombs to alert passersby of the fact. Anyone who touched a grave became ceremonially, get it out in a minute, unclean, something avoided, especially in the season of the Hebrew celebration of annual Passover, when they celebrated God's deliverance of the Hebrews from Egyptian oppression. Jesus referred to this tradition when comparing the hypocritical religious leaders of the day to whitewashed graves, clean on the outside, but on the outside, but dirty on the inside. Remember, Jesus lambasted the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the scribes. He said the outside appears clean, but the inside is filled with dead men's bones. Yeah.
Again, that may just be a coincidence, but I mean, it kind of just, I don't know, ties in.
It does sort of tie in, don't it?
It kind of makes you just wonder.
Makes you wonder, yeah. All right, so that's the first quote that we have. And it was from the classroomsynonym.com. And you'll see the other reference on the other page. So let's consider some more details that are not listed in the scriptures, but were traditions and customs of burying by the Jews. You see, the more that we can understand the background of the scriptures, the easier it is to understand what the scriptures are saying. Jesus of Nazareth was condemned to die by Pontius Pilate. Like a common criminal, he was executed by crucifixion. He was hung upon a cross with nails driven through his hands and feet. A Roman soldier stabbed him in the ribs with a spear. He died after hours of torment and exposure to the elements. I don't know so much about the exposure to the elements, but I'm sure that there were many hours of torment and torture there, with his followers at his feet. Many of his followers and disciples came together to plan and execute a proper burial for their beloved Messiah. Joseph and Nicodemus. Although it was not traditional for executed Roman prisoners to be given back to their families, Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy man from Judea, asked for the body of Jesus and was granted this wish by Pontius Pilate.
He would not have been granted that wish if Pontius Pilate had not executed Jesus at the behest of the Jews.
Well,
If he
Pilate
would-
didn't
if-
find anything wrong with Jesus.
If Pilate had executed Jesus for practical reasons or something he could find that he had lawfully violated, committed crimes,
He would not have allowed
he would
Joseph
not have
of
allowed
Arimathea
Joseph to have the body.
to have the body.
He would not have washed his hands. He would not have given any care whatsoever what happened.
That's correct.
Wouldn't you just been thrown in that refuse, burning refuse?
That's right. He would have been thrown in the refuse. And Pilate would not have lost a minute's sleep about it.
Right.
Right. I've seen a special on the History Channel where it goes on today in India, the same thing, because it's so unclean that it's always a constant fire by their main river, and it's always, that's where they, the bodies, everything's stoked, and it's been probably.
Outside of large cities, yes.
Because I know you've been over to several countries, but I've read about it, seen it on there, but yeah, just constantly going through hundreds and hundreds of years.
In smaller villages in India, you'll see the kids playing in the refuge and the trash, and outside of the village there's always a hill or, an empty blank spot, and that's where everybody throws their trash. And the kids dig through the trash, and that's what they spend their day doing. They're digging through the trash, until they're old enough to go to school. But they'll dig. But even then, a lot of kids can't afford to go to school because school's not free. You have to pay for it, just like it was in Jamaica. So a lot of kids that don't go to school, they literally are out there playing in the trash. It was nothing to see kids 10, 11 years old naked because they don't have any clothes, but they're running around in the trash picking up things. And that's what they play with. They find stuff that their parents can sell, whatever.
There's one place that reminded me of the Valley of Hinnom when I saw it, and that was in Jamaica. This was on an occasion where I had led a team down, and we were doing some, I guess you would say, seminars. We were conducting some Bible classes at one of the churches, and it was also, we had gotten Angela had gotten a notification from the Jamaican government that her work permit was ready and it had to be picked up in person. So Brother Stan Smith and he went with me while the other two fellows, Brother Richard Ironhider and Brother Andy Lee, stayed behind and conducted the classes for that day, and Brother Stan and myself went to Kingston. Right outside of Kingston, and it was gone by the time that we finally moved down there. But right outside the city of Kingston was a huge garbage dump, and it was always burning. That reminded me, and it was a mountain on one side and plains, and then a highway over here, a main highway, and it was almost exactly like Jamie described about in India.
I want to tell you, I was in Nigeria, and we were heading into Port Harcourt, and outside of Port Harcourt, there's a spot, and we had the windows rolled up and AC going, but let me tell you, the smell that came off of that burning pile of trash, and we were stuck in traffic, so for about 20 minutes we were easing through there. The stench of that burning trash was god-awful. I worked in power plants, paper mills, chemical plants. I didn't think there was anything that smelled worse than green liquor in a paper mill. That trash place, worst I've ever smelled. I've worked inside a trash burner here in Nashville. It's no longer here. There used to be a trash burner downtown in Nashville.
I've worked inside that trash burner. We did inspections inside that trash burner. Oh my goodness, that thing stunk. Still nothing. That trash burner was nothing compared to that trash. I don't know, field. I mean, it was their dump for Port Harcourt, and oh, the smell, horrendous. I can only imagine. I mean, obviously it would be worse today than it was then because you didn't have plastics, you didn't have a lot of that stuff. But folks, that's nasty. It really is, and you can smell that for miles.
Well, by the time that we finally moved to Jamaica, that place had been cleaned up, and you won't find it there today. But that was one place that I had been to that reminded me of the Valley of Hinnom. And I pointed it out to Brother Stan. He said, yeah, you're right. It does remind you of that, doesn't it? So anyway, so we've got a good idea of what takes place if a body isn't claimed. All right. Did we finish the paragraph? All right. Wrapping. Jesus was, huh? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. According to the Gospel of John in the New Testament, Joseph, along with Nicodemus, brought Jesus' body away from the crucifixion site to prepare him for burial rather than leaving him exposed like other crucified people. Now remember, sometimes they would be left on the cross for up to 6 days. They would not be taken down until they were dead. Wrapping. Jesus was washed, although there is no explicit detail in the New Testament about what was used to clean his body, which was covered in blood and other soil from his time on the cross. After washing Jesus, Joseph and Nicodemus wrapped his body carefully in linens, according to the Jewish practices of the time. Each of his limbs were wrapped, and his entire body was encircled in a shawl. The linen was of good quality, and roughly 75 pounds of spices were used to soak the cloth and anoint the body. Joseph and Nicodemus used myrrh and incense to mask the odors of death and prevent decay. Unlike pagans of the time, Jews did not practice cremation, and embalming or removing the organs was only an Egyptian practice at the time of Jesus' death. Yes, sir.
It's interesting that, with the washing and stuff, they would have, like you said, they would have cleaned those wounds and everything. And yet there are thousands of people that go by to see this shroud that shows
Mm-hmm.
the blood running, and people begin to worship that.
The Shroud of Turin.
Exactly. But according to this, they would have washed all those. Of course, he's not going to bleed anymore.
Right.
So all those would be.
Fascinating to watch on TV, but then we know the book says this.
Exactly.
But you can understand why when you see how they wrap the body. Yep, you're right. I was going to mention that. You beat me to it. That's okay. No. All right, let's look at the women. Several women, followers and family of Jesus, came from Galilee to mourn their Savior and prepare the body. They saw that Nicodemus and Joseph had already anointed Jesus with spices and perfumed oils. The women mentioned specifically in the Bible are Mary, Salome, and Mary Magdalene, although it is implied that others may have been present to help prepare Jesus for burial. Since the day after Jesus' death was the Sabbath, the women rested rather than adding additional ointment and perfume to his body on that day. When they returned on the first day of the week, the tomb was empty. So the scriptures indicate that the women brought more spices and things to put on the body. It was not like the body was going to be neglected. They were doing it. Joseph and Nicodemus were capable of beating them to it, so to speak. They had an inside track, if you will. The tomb. In addition to retrieving the body of Jesus and helping to prepare him for burial, Joseph provided an elegant tomb for Jesus. The tomb had been his own, located in a garden and cut from stone. Once they placed the body of Jesus in the tomb, they rolled a large stone in front of it to seal the tomb. A guard was put in place to keep people from stealing or vandalizing the grave site. And you see my reference there, down below it. All right? Thus, the body of Jesus was carefully laid in the new tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. It was on Wednesday afternoon, drawing close to the going down of the sun, which would begin a new day. Because Thursday was a high Sabbath, because of the Passover week, the bodies had to be taken down and properly disposed. This was not a regular Sabbath day, Saturday, but rather one of the Sabbaths that was considered to be a high Sabbath or a holy convocation that could occur on any day of the week. Let's look at 3 days and 3 nights. Now we get to the heart of the false teaching that is so prevalent in our day and time. The prevalent and most popular teaching concerning the resurrection of Jesus is that he was crucified on Friday and resurrected early Sunday morning. The Bible lists several references as to how long Jesus was to be in the grave. 3 days and 3 nights. Let's see how long Jesus was really in the tomb of Joseph.
That's what I was going to say, Brother Joe. Did you just debunk the fact on Wednesday that there's no way Good Friday could happen? Yeah, he did. I'm trying to learn, soak it up. That's what I thought.
All right. And for that reason, I explain it in the next paragraph.
He's been explaining it for years, but he goes over and over and over, and my kids wonder why I go over and over and over something. I get it honestly.
You don't get it right the first time, you get the 15th time.
Or 500th time.
All right. For calculation's sake, and I emphasize that, for calculation's sake, and this is how that we describe what literally happened. All right? For calculation's sake, let us set the going down of the sun, which was the actual time that the new day began. But that could vary from day to day. Okay? So, in order to calculate it, we just set it at the going down of the sun at 6 p.m. Okay? Now, let us also, for calculation's sake, that Joseph and Nicodemus finished placing the body of Jesus in the tomb at, say, around 5 p.m. Remember, the new day starts at 6:01 p.m. That would make it Thursday. Wednesday 5 p.m. to Thursday 5 p.m. would be 1 day and 1 night. Thursday 5 p.m. to Friday 5 p.m. would make 2 days and 2 nights. Friday 5 p.m. to Saturday 5 p.m. would make 3 days and 3 nights. This means that Jesus took his life back up at 5 p.m. and came out of the tomb at that time. Now understand, I'm using these times for calculation's sake to illustrate. Okay? Whatever. Here is a rule of the thumb. 72 hours. I think that's 3 days and 3 nights, right? 72 hours from the time that Jesus was placed in the tomb, he arose.
Not from the time he died, but from the time he was placed in the tomb.
Not from the time he died, that is correct. But from the time that Joseph and Nicodemus placed Jesus in the tomb, the clock began to tick. 72 hours later, he was gone. My setting, here's my explanation. My setting of these times is just to make it easier to calculate the amount of time. From whatever time Jesus was put in the tomb on Wednesday, 3 days and 3 nights from that time on Saturday, he would arise, just as the Bible prophecies say he would.
Bernie, seems like you should be getting more paychecks than you do in a week, don't it? 13 more, 12 more days? Should be getting 2 or 3 paychecks then, it looks like. Because the way that Brother Joe just described the days,
There you go.
if the days are 5:01 to 6 o'clock, that's a day. 6 check. I think we all cheated.
All right, now let's look at some events that took place during Jesus' entombment. Several things took place after Jesus was put in the tomb and before he arose on Saturday afternoon. Because Thursday was a high Sabbath, there was not anything that took place on this day. On Friday, the chief priests and Pharisees go before Pilate to demand that a guard be placed at the tomb to make sure that Jesus' disciples did not steal away his body and then claim he had risen on the 3rd day. Pilate granted their wish, so a guard was placed. This is all that was recorded that took place on Friday. Friday is the only day in the 3 days and 3 nights that was not a Sabbath. Okay? Thursday was a high Sabbath. That was a special Sabbath. And then Friday, regular day. Saturday is a regular Sabbath day. So only Friday was a day out of the whole 3 days and 3 nights that was not a Sabbath day. Okay. This is all that is recorded that took place on Friday. Friday was the only day in the 3 days and 3 nights that was not a Sabbath. I read this, didn't I? At the going down of the sun began a new day, Sunday. It was early Sunday morning. Let me pause here for a minute. Almost all of the teaching, except for a few of us, indicate that Jesus arose on Sunday morning, or implies that he did. The only reason that that stone was rolled away from the tomb was for people to be able to see into it, that it was empty. I don't think Jesus used the doorway when he arose. Yes.
So, I got to be quiet because you mentioned it later on. Never mind. Sorry.
Okay. All right. It was early Sunday morning. Yes.
Also, the scripture said toward the first day. It didn't say on, it said toward the first day.
Correct. These ladies were probably there before daylight. At least it seems to indicate the scriptures. I get that impression anyway. All right, so it was early Sunday morning when the women came to the tomb. Angels came and rolled back the tomb, or the stone rather, that had sealed the tomb. Now, it didn't take two angels to roll the stone back, but huh? They were male looking, let's put it that way, because they had no sex. They were sexless. But there is never an indication of a female gender appearing in angels. Yeah. Yes, Jamie.
Also got to look back at Scripture. If, say, for Abraham, in Abraham's case, when the angels came to Abraham, of course we know one of them was Jesus Christ, right? But when the angels came to Abraham, if it would have been women that came, he would not have spoken to them.
True.
Okay? You got to remember, again, when we talk about days and times, right? I mean, society or historical facts. For instance, when the Bible talks about there being 120 disciples, at that day and time, they would have only have counted men above the age of 30. So that meant that there was at least 120 men above the age of 30 in the upper room. Why? Why do we say that? Only because that was the custom of the time. We don't know for sure. Does that mean that potentially they were every man, woman, and child? Sure. But we don't know that. We have to go based upon customs of the time. So that use of angels being the appearance of men is based upon custom. But in the scriptures do talk about two men. For instance, Lot. There was two men. Lot refers to them as men, and then refers to the residents of Sodom and Gomorrah wanting those men, right? Send them out, right? So you look at Scripture, it's always referred to in a masculine sense.
There's another thing that stands out. More times than not, they appeared with two of them.
There's another reason for the two. If you look at scriptures, always talk about in the presence of two witnesses. The law required a minimum of two witnesses. If you were to accuse somebody, there had to be a minimum of two people who were eyewitnesses to that crime or to that effect.
Yes.
So an angel means witness or proclaimer, right? So again, they didn't take two of them.
Yeah.
One could have done the job.
Right.
But
there were two.
Correct.
There were two here. There were two at Sodom and Gomorrah. There were two, and we're going to see this after Jesus ascended. All right. And so on. So more often than not, you will find two angels together.
Only one reference I can think of that comes to mind right off the bat of there only being one angel is with Jacob. But it says it was a dream.
Also,
But yet, when he awoke, his hip hurt where the angel had touched him. Remember, he was...
Later on, an angel appeared to Joseph, an angel appeared to Elizabeth.
yeah, only one angel. And
That's good. I forgot about those two, those
that's,
two instances.
that-
Yes,
that's believed
correct.
to be Gabriel, because Gabriel was in charge of the angels of the intellectual realm. It was Gabriel that passed on messages. You remember in the book of Daniel, I'm getting off our subject just slightly here. In the book of Daniel, when Daniel was praying, and he prayed for, several days, Gabriel finally came to him and said that his prayer, Daniel's prayer, was heard at the very beginning of his praying. But Gabriel was hindered from coming to him to give him the answers that Daniel was asking for. Okay? By himself, Michael had to come to his rescue. After Gabriel gave his answer to Daniel, answer the questions that Daniel needed answering, Gabriel went back with Michael to fight. That's what the scriptures say. All right? Gabriel appeared to Joseph. Gabriel appeared to Zechariah, John's daddy. Gabriel appeared to Mary. Okay? All those instances, that was Gabriel's job. But I submit to you, on these other times, Abraham, Lot, the disciples, and so on, I submit to you that they were of the warrior angels of Michael. Michael was the archangel. He was over those the angels of the spiritual realm. Technically, he was over all of the angels. There's only one archangel, and that was Michael. All right, so let's quickly get back. But that would explain a little bit, on the angel's appearance here. All right. The angels came and rolled back the stone that had sealed the tomb. The angels tell him, the women, not to be afraid, but go and tell the brethren and the remainder of the disciples that Jesus has arisen and will meet them in Galilee as he had before instructed them. The guard faint dead away at the appearance of the angels. Now, these fellows were hardened Roman soldiers. They thought, yeah. The guard go to the chief priests and Pharisees to tell them what happened. They were instructed to say that they had fallen asleep and the disciples came and stole his body while they slept. This was a problem for them because being asleep at one's post was a death penalty. They were offered a great sum of money. In other words, they were bribed and told that if Pilate or any other official would hear about it, the chief priests and the Pharisees would take care of it for them. They accepted the money and went out and were so effective in telling their story, in the telling of their story, that Matthew writes the people believed it until the writing of Matthew's gospel. Jesus appears to the women and instructs them to tell the others. They did as they were told, but the rest did not believe them. Again, this goes back to the culture that Jamie mentioned a while ago. Peter and John ran to the tomb, John arriving first and then Peter, probably because John was younger than Peter. They witnessed the fact that indeed the stone that had sealed the tomb was rolled away and the tomb was empty. At some point on this day, Mary Magdalene saw Jesus and thought he was the gardener. She did not recognize him until he spoke to her. She started to rush to him, but he forbade her to touch him. He had not yet ascended to the heavenly Holy of Holies to place his blood on the altar there. He instructs her also to go to Galilee, where he will meet them. She goes and tells the remainder, but they don't believe her either. This all happened on early Sunday morning. Now, what I have just given to you, I seriously doubt that you will hear preached and taught outside of a scriptural Baptist church. Because most people don't even know it. If this were not the case, why was the Old Testament filled with sacrifices and their purpose? Because they were all pictures of what happened right here. Jesus had not yet ascended to heaven to place his blood on that heavenly Holy of Holies to satisfy God's wrath for sins. Oh, that's good. Later that same day, in the afternoon. So, we're not told when Jesus ascended, and this is different from his ascension. Okay? Sometime between the early Sunday morning when he meets all of them at the tomb, and Sunday afternoon, probably mid-afternoon, he ascended to heaven and he took care of that task. So later that same day in the afternoon, Jesus appeared to two of the disciples on the road to Emmaus. They did not recognize him. During the conversation with him, Jesus tells them about the prophecies concerning him, but they still do not recognize him. I've got "the" there. I left a Y off. I apologize. He was invited to eat with them, and he accepts the invitation and stays with him to eat the evening meal. They do not recognize him until he prays and gives thanks for the meal. Then they recognize him. He then disappears from their sight. And this is the reason I said Jesus didn't need that stone rolled away. He went through the top. Jerusalem, the upper room, Sunday night. Now this is Sunday night, and that means it's into Monday. The disciples once again gathered together. The two from Emmaus returned to Jerusalem and told the rest of the disciples of their experience with Jesus. Jesus appears. That's what the scriptures say. He appears in their midst. They were afraid, they are afraid, and until he reassures them and shows them the scars in his hands and feet, he asks for something to eat, and they give it to him. He expounds the scriptures to them and fully opened their understanding of them. Now, the scriptures also say that all the windows and the doors were barred because they were afraid of the Jews. And all of a sudden, Jesus appears in their sight. Now that, folks, no. On the human side it would be, but that's a typical of a glorified body. One that we will have someday. Praise the Lord. All right, the disciples tell Thomas, who had been absent at that meeting, but he does not believe and states that until he can feel the scars in his feet and hands and the spear thrust in his side, he cannot believe. 8 days later, the disciples are meeting again, and this time Thomas is with them. Jesus appears in their midst. Again, all the doors and windows are closed and there's no way in. Jesus addresses Thomas and invites him to feel the scars. Thomas does not, but addresses Jesus as his Lord and his God. Sea of Galilee. Peter said, I'm going fishing. Several of the others said they would go also. They fished all night and caught nothing. Come morning, they were close to the shore. There they saw Jesus. Jesus tells them to cast the net over the right side of the boat. They do so, and the nets are so full they cannot bring them into the boat. They call for the others who are close by in a boat to come help. They come ashore where Jesus has a fire going and some bread. He instructs them to bring some fish so they can cook and eat. After they had eaten, Jesus asks Peter if he loves him more than these. The Scriptures do not reveal what these are, but we can ascertain that Jesus is asking Peter if he loves him more than his life as a fisherman, his old life. Peter answers that he does. Jesus tells him to feed his lambs. Jesus asks Peter a second time, and Peter replies that he does. Jesus now tells him to feed his sheep. Jesus asks Peter yet a third time the same question. This grieves Peter. He replies to Jesus that he does, and Jesus answers, feed my sheep. Now there's a good study of the words that Jesus and Peter used in this conversation, and that's a subject within itself. What was wrong with Peter going fishing? He was going back to his old life. Peter probably thought that he was of no greater use to the Lord because he had denied him. And that's the reason that Jesus homed in on Peter. And you'll find that after this, Peter, in a short time later, Peter would preach on the day of Pentecost, and 3,000 people were saved. Galilee, time and place unknown. In Galilee, sometime after the resurrection, on a mountain somewhere in Galilee, I would think the Mount of Transfiguration. But that's just my opinion. Jesus meets with the disciples as he had said he would. We know not where or when this meeting took place. The important thing is that he said he would meet them, and he did. The days before Jesus' ascension. Jesus was on the earth for 40 days after his resurrection. he was seen by many during this time. Rather than comment, I want to use the passages that refer to his appearing to many. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 3 through 6. Paul said, "For I delivered unto you first of all that which I also received, how that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he arose again the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he was seen of Cephas, then of the 12. After that he was seen of above 500 brethren at once, of whom the greater part remain unto this present, but some are fallen asleep. After that he was seen of James, then of all the apostles." Now we should note some things found in these verses. Number one, Paul reaffirms that Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days and nights. He arose again on the third day, just as the Scriptures said he would. The Scriptures to which Paul was referring were the Old Testament prophecies of Jesus' birth, or death, burial, and resurrection. 2, Jesus was seen by Peter, Cephas. 3, he appeared to over 500 brethren at one time, most of whom, Paul says, were still alive at the time he was writing the book of 1 Corinthians, but some had died. 4, he was then seen by James. And then 5, he was seen of all the apostles. Acts 1:3, to whom also he showed himself alive after his passion by many infallible proofs, being seen of them 40 days, and speaking of the things pertaining to the kingdom of God. This passage gives us the proof that he was present and active for 40 days after his resurrection. He gave many proofs that could not be disputed. There could be no doubt that he was who he said he was, and that he had indeed rose from the grave. This passage also lets us know that he was actively teaching during those days. The Mount of Olives, the 40th day after his resurrection. Jesus and the disciples are probably in Jerusalem in what has become their regular meeting place, the upper room. Jesus gives some final instructions, such as the Great Commission, and that they are to remain in Jerusalem until they receive the power, in other words, the ability, to start carrying out the commission he had just given them. He leads them out to the Mount of Olives near Bethany, and there he ascends to heaven. The disciples are so amazed that they stand there just looking up where he had disappeared from their sight. 2 angels appeared to them and tell them that he will come back just as he had gone away. But they had work to do in the meantime. In conclusion to part 13, John 20:25. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written every one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written. Amen. Brother Bernie, would you dismiss us, please?
You've been listening to the live broadcast of the Wednesday evening Bible study of the Mayfield Drive Baptist Church in Smyrna, Tennessee. We invite you to tune in at the same time next Wednesday evening for another live broadcast of the Wednesday evening Bible study. We would love to see your comments regarding this broadcast. You may email us at imbr@imbmpodcast.com. That's imbr@imbmpodcasts.com. Or you may write to us at International Missionary Baptist Radio, P.O. Box 1676, Smyrna, Tennessee 37167. That's International Missionary Baptist Radio, P.O. Box 1676, Smyrna, Tennessee 37167. Thank you for listening, and may you have a blessed day.